The metal doors of the transport shuttle hissed loudly as they opened. Jake Morrison stepped onto the smooth, shiny floor of the Galactic Coalition training facility for the first time. He felt dozens of eyes on him the moment his boot hit the ground. Not eyes of people. Eyes from another world. It clicked its mouthparts together like a giant insect with too many legs. Jake had been studying alien species for 3 weeks while traveling through space, so he knew that sound was funny. The bug alien was making fun of him. "Look, another human," the creature said through a small device on its neck that changed alien speech into English. "They must really need these soft things if they're sending more of them." Jake didn't say anything. He kept his face calm and walked straight to the registration desk at the end of the huge hall. He had heard things like this before. He had heard other recruits say the same things on the whole trip from Earth to this training station. People were too weak. People were too weak. People didn't have sharp claws, tough skin, or the ability to spit poison. They weren't good for real fighting. From somewhere to Jake's left, another alien spoke. This one looked like it was made of glass or crystal, and light bounced off of it in strange ways. "Deathworlders with delusions," it said in a low voice. The tone was sarcastic and rude. Jake had heard that word before as well. Deathworlder. People thought that Earth was one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. A lot of gravity. Very bad weather. There are predators all over. Diseases that could kill you in a matter of days. People should have respected them because they had lived and thrived in such a world. But it didn't. Most aliens thought that humans were just lucky to be alive. Stupid and lucky. The desk for registering was on a raised platform. Jake had to tilt his head back to see the training officer behind it. The officer was very big. Theron was his name, and he was a Kravik. He was almost 8 feet tall, maybe even taller. There was a rust-colored shell all over his body that looked like it was harder than steel. Big arms and legs. Sharp edges. He looked like he could break through a concrete wall without stopping. Jake couldn't quite figure out what Theron was thinking when he looked down at him. Was it pity? Was it hatred? It's possible that both are true. Jake Morrison. People. Theron said, "Earth." His mouth made clicking and growling sounds, but the box on his chest that translated it into English made it sound flat and emotionless. Squad 7. Units that can be thrown away. When Theron said, "expendable units," the group of alien recruits behind Jake burst into laughter. The laughter was not friendly. Everyone laughed in a way that made it clear they thought Jake was going to die soon. Jake frowned. Expendable? What does that mean? Theron gave him a flat data pad with a glowing screen full of information that Jake would need to look over. You will be put in combat situations that are very dangerous. It means you don't have a good chance of living. Very low. Theron stopped for a moment and then said, "In 2 hours your first simulation will start. Don't die right away. My training stats look bad because of it." Jake took the pad of data. He had something to say. He wanted to know why they were putting him in the most dangerous group right away. But he already knew the answer. They didn't think he would live. They didn't care if he lived. He was just a person and people could be replaced. He walked away from the desk and toward the barracks part of the building. The insect alien spoke again behind him. 2 hours? I bet he won't last more than 20 minutes. There was more laughter. Very loud. Making fun of me. Jake kept going. His face stayed calm even though his jaw was tight. A long time ago he learned not to let people know when they bothered him. Let them have a good time. Let them believe he was weak. Let them believe that he would die in his first simulation. They would know. Jake had lived on Earth his whole life. He had made it through Earth. He had hunted in woods where every shadow could hide something that wanted to eat you. He had climbed mountains where one wrong move could mean death. He had swum in oceans where things bigger than buildings lived in the depths. He had been killed by Earth 1,000 times, but he was still alive. These aliens didn't know what humans could do. They thought weakness when they saw soft skin. They thought they were helpless because they didn't see any claws. They didn't know that people had taken over their world not because they were the strongest, but because they were the smartest. Because they changed. Because they never stopped trying. Jake got to the barracks and found the bunk he was supposed to sleep in. It was small and uncomfortable, made for alien bodies that weren't quite like his. He sat down on the thin mattress and dropped his gear. The data pad in his hand had information about Squad 7. Missions with a lot of risk. A low rate of success. For people have been hired by this team before. All of them died within the first month of training. Jake put the pad down and leaned back against the cold wall. There are 2 hours until his first simulation. He had 2 hours until he would be put in a combat situation that would push him to his very limits. Probably made to break him. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply and slowly. His heart was racing, but not because he was scared. Because I was excited. From determination. Let them laugh for now. Let them believe he was a joke. Let them think that people were weak, soft, and sure to fail. Jake Morrison was about to show them what a real person could do. And when he was done, none of them would be able to laugh. He opened his eyes and looked up at the barracks ceiling. 50 other recruits were getting ready for their own simulations somewhere in this building. Most of them would easily pass. Most of them had natural advantages. Armor, speed, and strength. Weapons built into their bodies. Jake didn't have any of that. He only had his brain. His desire. His refusal to give up. That was enough on Earth. It would be enough here too. Everything changed after Jake had been at the training center for 3 days. He was with his squad in the meal hall, eating something that was supposed to be food but tasted like wet cardboard and metal shavings. His squad wasn't very good. They were all people who had been turned down by better units. Species that had failed in other places and ended up in Squad 7, the group that could be thrown away. Vorin was sitting across from him. Vorin was a depths, which is a type of water creature from a world of water. His neck had gills on the sides that kept opening and closing, and his skin was blue, which made him look like he belonged underwater, which he did. There was a shardborn next to Vorin whose name Jake couldn't say, so everyone called him Prism. His body looked like it was made of living crystal, and light bounced off of it in strange ways. They were talking about the bad training exercise they had that morning when the alarms went off. Jake's teeth hurt from the loud, piercing sounds. Red lights started flashing all over the dining hall, making everything look like blood. Jake looked up, not sure what was going on. What's going on? A voice came over the facility's speaker system before anyone could answer. It was calm but strong. To all staff members. The containment protocol Apex is now in effect. All new soldiers must go back to the barracks right away. This is not a drill. Everyone in the dining hall stopped moving. Then all of a sudden everything started to move. Aliens pushing away from tables. The trays fell to the floor. The sound of feet, claws, and other body parts rushing toward the exits. Jake got up slowly. What is Apex? Vorin's gills were fluttering faster now, which Jake knew meant he was scared. Very anxious. You really don't know? Jake shook his head. Vorin made a gurgling sound that his translator turned into words. The Zayrath. They are bringing in a Zayrath. Jake didn't know what the name meant. What's a Zayrath? This time, Prism spoke and his voice sounded strange and ringing. Top predators from Zerathia Prime. They are 12 feet tall. Only muscles, claws, and teeth. Just machines for killing. He stopped for a moment. The Coalition has been trying to teach them for years. It never works. They have never been able to successfully integrate a single Zayrath into the military. Jake walked over to the meal hall's wall of reinforced windows. He could see the main courtyard of the building from outside. 3 big hover platforms were moving slowly through the open area. A huge transport container, the kind used to move dangerous goods, sat on top of them. The container was made of thick metal with strong corners and heavy locks. There were armed guards all around the container. At least 20 of them. They were all ready to fight with their weapons. Jake could tell they were tense by the way they moved even from this far away. After that, he heard it. A noise that sounds like thunder. Boom, boom, boom. There was something inside that container that was banging against the walls. Every time something hit it, the whole container shook. Whatever was inside was tough. Very strong. They brought another one? Prism whispered, his voice full of disbelief and sounding like glass. After what happened to the last 3 trainers. Vorin nodded and his gills kept moving. I heard the command wants one last try. They will kill this Zayrath and give up on the whole Zayrath project if they can't train it. Jake moved closer to the window. The container was now passing by close enough for him to see details. There were small, strong viewing ports on the sides made of thick glass or maybe some other high-tech material. Jake saw them through one of these ports. 2 bright yellow eyes with vertical slits for pupils. They were looking out from inside the container, and for a brief moment their eyes met Jake's. He was surprised by something in that look. There was anger, yes. There was power, yes. But there was also smartness. Not the cleverness of a wild animal, but real, deep smarts. This wasn't just a monster. This was a person who could think and feel and knew exactly what was going on. He knew he was stuck in a cage, being moved around like cargo and treated like an object instead of a person. Jake's chest felt like it was twisting. He knew how that felt. He had experienced it himself for the past 3 days. The feeling that people are looking down on you. Of being ignored. Being treated like you weren't important. The container moved on, and the eyes were no longer in sight. But Jake couldn't stop thinking about them. He didn't sleep much that night. He couldn't stop seeing those yellow eyes. Thought a lot about what Prism and Voron had said. 3 trainers died. Never got the training they needed. If this attempt failed, they would be killed. Jake had made up his mind by morning. He walked through the hallways of the building until he found Commander Price's office. Price was one of only 3 human officers in the whole building, and people said she was fair but strict. Jake could hear voices coming from inside her closed door. Voices that are angry. Someone was saying, "No way." Jake knew Theron's voice even though the door was closed. That thing has killed 3 trainers who know what they're doing. 3 experts who knew what they were doing. I won't let you try again. It's too risky. The Zerath is not a living thing. That was Commander Price. Her voice was sharp and steady. His name is Korthax and he is a living thing. He has feelings and thoughts. We are going to kill a prisoner who has done nothing wrong but be what evolution made him unless we can find someone who can really connect with him. Jake took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The voices stopped right away. A second went by. Then Commander Price yelled, "Come in." Jake opened the door and went in. The office was small but useful. Commander Price was sitting at a metal desk with reports and data pads on it. She was in her 50s, had short gray hair, and her eyes looked tired but sharp. Theron stood next to the desk looking down on everything. His rust-colored shell shone in the office lights. Price turned to Jake. "Private Morrison. What can I do for you?" Jake stood still with his hands at his sides and his back straight. "Ma'am, I want to help with the Zerath." The room was completely quiet. Price and Theron both looked at him. Then Theron's translator made a loud, harsh barking sound. Laughter. The person wants to die. So predictable. But Price was not laughing. With those tired, sharp eyes, she was looking at Jake. "Why would you want to do this?" Jake thought about it for a second. "Can I speak freely, ma'am?" Price nodded. "Granted." Jake was careful with what he said. "Everyone here thinks people are weak, soft, not useful. Since I got here, I've heard it every day." He stopped. Maybe Zerath Korthax feels the same way about himself right now. Stuck. Not understood. Maybe he just needs someone who has been through it before. Someone who gets it. Price sat back in her chair and drummed her fingers on the desk. "You know that 3 trained xenopsychologists have already died trying to get in touch with Korthax?" "Yes, ma'am." 3 professionals. People who spent years learning about how aliens think and act. "And you still want to give it a shot?" "Yes, ma'am." Jake now knew that Theron's mandibles clicking together meant he didn't believe what he was saying. "This is just plain stupid. In a few minutes, the human will be ripped apart and we'll be 1 recruit short. This shouldn't happen." But Price was slowly nodding, almost to herself. She stared at Jake for a long time, and Jake thought she could see something in him that Theron couldn't. "Okay, Morrison," she finally said. "You have 1 chance. At 6 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. You will go into Korthax's cell. We will consider it progress if you are still alive after an hour." Jake's heart started to race, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you, ma'am." When he turned to leave, he heard Theron mumble behind him. "The person wants to die." Jake smiled as he left the office. Everyone thought that. They would find out how wrong they were. The cell that held the people was huge. It was 40 feet long on each side, and the walls were made of reinforced titanium that could probably survive a missile hit. There was only 1 window, a thick piece of reinforced glass that people could look through from a safe distance. Jake knew that Commander Price was watching from the other side of that window. Theron was keeping an eye on things. There were probably a dozen other people in there too, waiting to see the person get ripped apart. Jake was at the door. He was wearing the standard fatigues, which were the basic military clothes they had given him on his first day. No armor. No safety gear. No weapons of any kind. Just him and whatever was about to happen. His earpiece started to make noise. Commander Price's voice came through. It was calm but had a hint of worry in it. "Last chance to think about it again, Morrison?" Jake took a deep breath. His heart was racing so fast that he could feel it in his throat, but his voice was steady. "Ma'am, I'm fine." There was a break. Then the door slowly opened with a hissing sound from the hydraulics. Jake could smell it before he could see inside the cell. It was a strong, thick musk like the smell that wild animals have. But there was something else in it, something sharp and electric like the air after a lightning strike. The mix made Jake's hair stand on end. After that, he saw Korthax. 12 feet high. That number didn't really show how it felt to see him in person. The scales on Korthax were so dark blue that they looked almost black, like the ocean's deepest part at midnight. It looked like the scales absorbed light instead of reflecting it. His body was all muscle, with cords and power, and it was made for violence. 4 arms came out of his torso, and each one ended in a hand with claws as long as kitchen knives. Those claws looked like they could cut through steel. His head was long and almost reptilian, with a strong jaw and rows of teeth that Jake could see even when Korthax's mouth was closed. The yellow eyes that Jake had seen through the transport container were now staring at him. Burning. Smart. Hazardous. From the base of Korthax's skull to the end of his thick, strong tail, which could probably break bones with a single swing, there was a ridge of bone spikes along his spine. Korthax was crouched in the far corner of the cell, watching Jake like a predator watches its prey. Jake went inside. The door slammed shut behind him with a loud bang that echoed through the cell. The sound was the end. There was no way to go back now. For a long time neither of them moved. Jake stood by the door and tried to keep his breathing steady. Korthax stayed in his corner, his yellow eyes never blinking or looking away. Then Korthax jumped. He moved faster than Jake thought something that big could. He was in the corner 1 second and in the air the next, with all 4 arms outstretched and claws ready to rip and tear. Jake was ready for this. He had spent the whole night watching videos of the last attempts to train Korthax. The same method had been tried by all 3 trainers. They stood up straight to try to look scary. They waved their hands in a threatening way. Some of them used shock prods to try to get Korthax to give in by hurting him and making him afraid. They were trying to show Korthax that they were the alpha and that he had to do what they said. In a matter of minutes, all 3 were dead. Jake did something else. Instead of standing his ground or trying to look tough, Jake dropped down and rolled to the left. Not back, away from Korthax, but to the side. He wasn't running away. He was avoiding. Korthax's claws hit the titanium wall where Jake had just been standing. It was a harsh, loud sound like metal scraping against metal. The Zerath spun around at a terrifying speed, faster than any creature that size should be able to move. But Jake was already on the move again. He kept his body low and moved smoothly and easily. Not hostile. Not a threat. Just moving. "What are you doing, Morrison?" Price's voice was sharp and urgent in his earpiece. Jake didn't say anything. He couldn't afford to lose focus. He needed all of his focus. Korthax went around in a circle and so did Jake. He stayed away from them, but he wasn't running. Not running away. His heart was pounding in his chest like a drum, but he made himself breathe steadily and slowly. This was the most important part. Jake understood this better than the other trainers did. People were not the top predators because they were strong or fast. Because they were persistent, humans became the top predators. Because they could survive longer than anything else on Earth. Jake's ancestors hunted by chasing animals for hours or even days until they were too tired to run. They weren't the quickest runners. They weren't the best at fighting. But they never stopped. They never stopped trying. They kept going until their prey couldn't move anymore. Korthax charged once more. Jake dodged, rolled, and came up 10 feet away. He was already starting to feel sore muscles, but he pushed through it. Korthax charged again. Jake got away. Again. And again. Time got weird. Jake couldn't remember how many times Korthax had attacked. He kept moving, avoiding, and keeping his breathing steady, even though his lungs were starting to hurt. It had been an hour. Now Jake could see that Korthax had changed. The Zerath's breathing was heavier and harder. Those yellow eyes showed anger and confusion. This little, soft thing was supposed to be easy to catch. It was supposed to die quickly. But it wouldn't die. It wouldn't stop moving. Jake's legs hurt like they were on fire. His muscles were all screaming at him to stop and rest. But he kept going. Not challenging at all. Never running away. Just keep going. Someone whispered behind the window of observation. Jake could barely hear it in his ear. "He's wearing it down." Theron's voice came next, and his translator made it clear that he didn't believe what he was saying. Not possible. Zeraths can last 3 times as long as any other kind of creature. They ought to be able to. Not 3 times human endurance, Commander Price said in a low voice. Jake saw it happen right then. Korthax's movements changed. The attacks were less violent and more careful. More interested. The Zerath no longer wanted to kill. He was trying things out. Getting smarter. Trying to figure out this strange creature that wouldn't give up or die. It had been 2 hours since Jake had gone into the cell. His legs were shaking now because he was so tired. But Korthax had completely stopped attacking. The Zerath just stood there 10 feet away with its head slightly to one side. Those yellow eyes were looking at Jake very closely. Jake made up his mind. He slowly and carefully lowered himself to the ground. He sat with his legs crossed and his hands on his lap. Open. Not threatening. Weak. Waiting. Korthax didn't move for a long time. Then he took a step forward very slowly. He sniffed the air with his flared nostrils. Jake didn't move at all. His heart was racing again, but this time it was for a different reason. This was the time. This was the point at which everything would either go well or badly. Korthax moved forward again. Then one more. He was very close now. Close enough for Jake to feel the heat coming off of him. Those claws were close enough to Jake that they could kill him in one swipe. The Zerath put his head down. Jake could feel hot breath on his hair and shoulders. Korthax was sniffing him to learn his scent and figure out what he was. Korthax then sat down slowly and on purpose. There were 3 feet between them. The huge top predator and the small person were sitting across from each other. No one in the observation room moved. No one said anything. Everyone was holding their breath. At last, Theron whispered, "What is he doing?" Commander Price smiled, and her face showed a hint of pride. "Something that people are very, very good at. He's getting a friend." It had been 3 weeks since Jake first went into Korthax's cell. 3 weeks ago, everyone thought he would die in a few minutes. Rumors and whispers were going around the whole training center. The person had lived. Not only did they survive, but they also did the impossible. The Zerath hadn't killed him. There was something strange and never before seen going on in Containment Cell 7, and everyone wanted to know how it happened. Jake was now spending 8 hours a day with Korthax. But they were no longer stuck in that titanium cell. They practiced together in the open yards where other teams practiced fighting moves. In the virtual reality rooms they ran simulations. They even sat together in the meal halls, where Jake would eat his awful-tasting human rations and Korthax would eat whatever raw meat the facility provided for carnivorous species. It was amazing how much Korthax had changed. He was still 12 feet tall and full of predatory power, with midnight blue scales all over him and 4 arms with deadly claws on the ends. But his eyes looked different now. The anger was gone. He no longer felt the need to fight and kill anything that came near him. Focus took its place. Go. Trust. Every day, Commander Price called Jake into her office for what she called a debrief. She was really trying to figure out how Jake did something that trained xenopsychologists with decades of experience had not been able to do. Jake sat in the metal chair across from her desk, which was not very comfortable. He was very tired. The training was very hard and it pushed both him and Korthax to their limits. But he was happy too. Even happy. He felt like he was doing something important for the first time since he got to this place. Price leaned in and looked at him closely with her sharp eyes. "Tell me again. How did you do that? How did you get the most dangerous predator in the galaxy to be your partner?" Jake thought about how to say it. "Ma'am, humans evolved as pack animals. It's in our genes. We connect with other people. We make connections. That's how we made it on Earth. We weren't the strongest kind of life. We weren't the fastest. But we knew how to get along." He stopped for a moment to think about what to say. Think about the saber-toothed cats that lived on Earth. Big predators with sharp teeth like daggers. People didn't win because they were stronger. We could never get stronger. We found wolves instead. Predators that are wild and dangerous on their own. And somehow, over the course of thousands of years, we changed those wolves into dogs. We made rivals into friends. We included them in our group. Price nodded slowly. But Zeraths are the top predators. They hunt by themselves. They don't make groups or packs. They are naturally alone. So were wolves once upon a time, Jake said with a small smile. The thing is, Korthax is not dumb. He is very smart. But everyone here has been using him like a weapon. Like something to use. They tried to control him, hurt him, and scare him into obeying them. Jake shook his head. Things changed once Korthax realized I wasn't trying to control him, dominate him, or use him. I was only trying to get along with him. To be his partner and not his boss. And he said something in response. Jake could see the training yard through the window of Price's office. Korthax was out there right now, going through an obstacle course that tested his speed, agility, and ability to solve problems. His huge body moved with raw power and deadly grace, but now every move was under control. He wasn't just using brute force. He was thinking, making plans, and carrying them out perfectly. Dozens of other recruits had stopped what they were doing to watch around the edges of the training yard. These were the same aliens that had made fun of Jake 3 weeks ago. Those who made fun of him and said he was weak and useless. Now they looked at Korthax with a mix of awe, fear, and grudging respect. No one was laughing anymore. Price looked out the window where Jake was looking. Other recruits have been asking about you. About how you did this. I saw, Jake said. He had the feeling that they were watching him all the time. In the halls. In the dining hall. While training. A few people looked interested. A few people looked jealous. Some people looked angry as if Jake's success was an insult to them. Price turned around to look at him. Theron wants you to do a tactical exercise. Integration of the whole squad. You, Korthax, and 4 other people you choose. Jake straightened up. The last test. A different version of it, Price said. Command has been keeping an eye on your progress. They want to know if what you've done can be done again. If human-Zerath partnerships can really work in real combat. Morrison, this is more than just you and Korthax now. This could change everything. When? Jake asked. 3 days. Jake nodded slowly, but his mind was already racing. 3 days to get a team together. 3 days to teach them. He had 3 days to show that what he had done was not just a fluke or luck, but something real that could happen again. He said, "We'll be ready." Jake went back to the barracks that night after a long day of training. He was tired and his muscles hurt, but he had to get to work. He had to put together a team. 4 members plus him and Korthax. All 6. Vorin was waiting by Jake's bunk when he got there. The Depths was standing there in the dim light of the barracks, his gills fluttering nervously. Vorin said, "I want to be on your team. No hello. No small talk. Just get to the point." Jake stared at him. "Why?" Vorin said, "Because I was wrong about you." His translator made his voice sound flat, but Jake could tell he was feeling something. About people. Everyone was wrong. You might be able to turn a group of losers into something better if you can turn a Zerath into a teammate or partner. Something better. Jake looked at Vorin for a moment. Then he gave a nod. "Okay, you're in." By the next morning, Jake had all of his team members there. Vorin, the Depths, is an expert in underwater operations and fighting in water. Beth Miller was another person who worked with explosives and demolitions. Prism, the young Shardborn who had been called too weak for frontline duty but had a great mind for strategy and tactical analysis. And Garrett Hayes, a human sniper who had been kicked out of 3 different units for not following the rules. This really meant that he thought for himself instead of just following orders. They were all in one of the training rooms and Jake looked at each of them in turn. Garrett was the first to speak up. "People who don't fit in and don't want to. That's who we are. That's what they all believe." Jake shook his head. "Underdogs. And now we're going to show them what underdogs can do when they work together." Korthax stood next to Jake, who was much shorter than everyone else. He said something in his native language that sounded deep and came from somewhere in his chest. Jake's translator turned it into words, "Pack hunts better than solo." Jake smiled. "Exactly." The next 3 days were very hard. Jake pushed his squad through every scenario, simulation, and drill he could think of. He worked them until they were tired, then made them work even harder. That kind of stress would have broken most military units. But Jake didn't lead like the alien officers did. He didn't rule by being the boss and making threats of punishment. He acted like a person in charge. Jake listened when Prism made a tactical suggestion. Jake changed his mind when Vorin pointed out a flaw in the plan. Instead of micromanaging every detail, he let Beth and Garrett take care of their own areas of expertise. Korthax wasn't just muscle and raw power anymore, he was a full member of the team. He used his predator instincts to protect the squad by keeping an eye out for threats and keeping them safe. The Galactic Coalition had never seen anything like what they were making. A real pack. A team led by people where everyone was important, everyone was heard, and fear was replaced by trust. Garrett went up to Jake the night before the evaluation. "Sir, may I speak freely?" "Always," Jake said. From the start he had made that clear. People on this team weren't afraid to say what they thought. Garrett looked at the rest of the squad, who were all over the training room checking their gear and taking a break. "I really think we're going to make this work." Jake looked in the same direction. People and aliens working together. Predator and prey species putting their lives in each other's hands. It would have been impossible 3 weeks ago. "Yeah," Jake said in a low voice. "I believe we are." The arena for the combat simulation was huge. A quarter-mile square of land that is always changing. There were ruins of buildings, crumbling walls, and collapsed structures in one part that made a maze of places to hide and ambush. In another part there was a thick forest with trees and brush where you could hardly see anything. And in the middle there were wide open killing fields where you couldn't hide or run. There were 50 autonomous combat drones waiting in that huge arena. These were not easy machines. They had advanced AI that could learn and change. Their only goal was to find and kill every member of Jake's squad. According to standard coalition military doctrine, a 6-person squad working at full capacity could only handle about 20 drones before they were overwhelmed and destroyed. The current record for the facility was 23 drones killed before the squad was killed. Jake's team was about to face 50. Commander Price stood next to Jake in the staging area just outside the arena. The rest of his team was checking their gear one last time. Voren was trying out his plasma rifle. Beth was carefully putting her demolition charges in order. Garrett was carefully adjusting the scope on his sniper rifle. Prism was looking over tactical maps on a data pad. The bright lights above him made his crystal body shine. Korthax stood still and ready, his yellow eyes shining with focused intensity. Price was worried about Jake. You don't have to do this. I can use the information we've already gathered. What you've done with Korthax is already a big deal. You have shown that humans and Zerath can work together. That's enough. Jake shook his head. With all due respect, ma'am, we aren't here to make history. We are here to show something. Which one? Jake looked at his team. His group. The coalition had told each of them that they were useless. Voren too slow. Beth, you're too careless. Garrett is too self-sufficient. Prism is also weak. Korthax is also too dangerous. And Jake himself is too human. That humans don't win by being the strongest, Jake said in a low voice. We win when we make everyone around us stronger. Price looked at him for a long time. Then she smiled, and that smile showed pride. Have a good hunt, Private. With a loud mechanical rumble, the huge doors to the arena started to open. Jake could see the urban ruins section beyond them, with shadows and broken concrete waiting. Okay everyone, Jake said looking at his team. Don't forget the plan. Stay flexible. Stay with each other. Believe in each other. Korthax said something in his own language. The translator changed it to say, Pack stays strong. Pack stays strong, Jake said again. They moved into the arena in formation, but it wasn't the strict, organized way that coalition forces did. This was more natural and organic. Korthax moved ahead, his predator senses on high alert, looking for danger. Prism stayed in the middle and sent tactical information to everyone through their communication network. Garrett quickly started looking for high ground, a place where his sniper rifle would work best. Beth and Voren watched the sides for attacks while they were on the flanks. Jake was in charge of everything, making sure that all 6 squad members worked together as one. The first drones showed up 3 minutes into the simulation. 10 of them were sleek, metallic machines that moved using anti-gravity propulsion. They spread out in a normal search pattern, like the ones that are programmed into coalition tactical databases. Works well. Proven. Easy to guess. Pattern analysis, Jake said calmly into his communicator. 40 drones. The team was getting tired now. Jake could hear how hard everyone was breathing over the communicators. Voren moved more slowly. Beth's hands shook a little as she got the charges ready. Garrett's shots were still accurate, but it took him a little longer to line them up. But they kept going. The drones tried to break up the squad and pick them off one by one, but they used Korthax as a base. The squad gathered around him because of his huge size and raw strength. When drones tried to attack from the air, Garrett's shooting skills and Prism's ability to predict what would happen stopped them before they could hit. Jake changed everything when the drones started to learn their patterns and tactics. He switched strategies like water takes on the shape of whatever container it fills. 40 drones have crashed. No deaths. Now the observation room was quiet. Every officer, trainer, and analyst was looking at the screens with looks that ranged from disbelief to awe. There are 45 drones. The squad was running out of bullets. Beth had used up most of her charges. Garrett's rifle only had 1 magazine left. Voren's plasma rifle was getting too hot, and the barrel was glowing with extra energy. And then it did. Beth got hit by pieces of a drone that blew up. She fell down with a scream of pain when a piece of metal hit her leg. Beth's hit, Jake said into the radio, forcing himself to stay calm even though his heart was racing. Korthax moved without being told to. He put his huge body between Beth and the drones that were coming in, using himself as cover. His scales could take hits that would kill anyone else. Voren dropped down next to Beth and pulled out first aid supplies. He worked quickly to stop the bleeding while Korthax kept them both safe. The group kept fighting. Got over it. 47 drones are down. 1 person was hurt but no one died. 48. 49. 50. The last drone fell to a combined attack. Garrett's last bullet hit its propulsion system, and one of Korthax's claws ripped through its main processor. Then the arena went quiet. Jake's squad stood in the middle of the wreckage of 50 destroyed drones, breathing heavily and covered in sweat, dirt, and small cuts. Beth was leaning on Voren. Her leg was bandaged but stable. The voice of the simulation's AI echoed through the arena, sounding cold and final. All enemy units have been neutralized. The evaluation is done. Squad 100% of the time, 7 people survive. The rate of hostile elimination is 100%. This performance is better than any other in the history of the facility. There was silence in the observation room for a few heartbeats. Then Commander Price began to clap. The sound bounced off the walls of the quiet room. Everyone in that observation room joined her one by one. Theron, too, clicked his mandibles together in a way that Jake had learned meant respect and recognition. They had done it. The people who aren't expected to win. The ones who didn't get picked. The person in his pack that can't be done. They had done what everyone said was impossible. Claude is an AI, so he can make mistakes. Please check your answers again.